Thousands of Kenyans have taken to the streets of Nairobi to mark a year since protesters stormed Parliament to challenge a controversial finance bill. When the bill was passed, police opened fire on protesters. Police have already deployed tear gas and water cannon against protesters. Parliament and the president's office in the capital were barricaded ahead of the demonstrations, while roads leading to the Parliament building were sealed off with razor wire. We'll cross to one of our correspondents in a few minutes, but before that, let's give you some insight into how the so-called Gen Z protests came to include anger over alleged deadly police violence. Sela Oneko and DW's team in Nairobi report on how the parents of one young man who was killed last year are coping and how new cases of police violence are rocking the country.
Young Kenyans are protesting on the streets again, and once more, they're angry at the death of one of their own. They say at the hands of the authorities. This time, it's Albert Ojwang's name they're calling. He was a teacher and blogger who was arrested for publishing supposedly false claims about the deputy police chief and found dead in his police cell. Watching Ojwang's father on TV is a horror for Jillian Munyao and Crispin Odawa. Their son Rex was shot and killed at a protest a year ago.
Sometimes I watch whatever is happening on TV there. My tears always comes.
It's so painful that we are trying to heal, then come another bombshell of Ojwang.
Rex Masai Kanyike was the first person to die during last year's so-called Gen Z protests against the controversial finance bill. Local news outlets showed CCTV footage of a crowd running from the police and a man thought to be a plainclothes officer shooting a handgun. Rex's parents show us where he died.
You could trace the blood from where he was.
From where he was shot.
There, to this place. Then some, when they were crossing the road.
Boniface Mwangi, a prominent activist, arrived at the clinic that evening and found Rex's family and friends standing over his body.
It unlocked emotions that I've never had before. And then we had to be there for the family. We organized a fundraiser for the family. And we thought Rex was the first and the last person to be shot. And then a couple of days later, on June 25th, the government killed more people.
Rex's death became integrated into the protests. They grew, and eventually people stormed the Parliament building. That's when security forces fired on them. Kenya's police watchdog IPOA is investigating 60 deaths and 233 injuries connected to police conduct during the 2024 protests. Criticized for being ineffective and intransparent, IPOA says the police often do not cooperate.
For example, an incident may happen near a police station, or there's a demonstration in a county or somewhere else, and somebody is killed. Who was issued which gun? Those are very basic information that you require before you even start investigations. But the law says the officer of the police station needs to cooperate.
There are some signs of consequences. 6 men, including 3 police officers, are now facing murder charges in connection with Albert Ojwang's death, and Kenya's deputy police chief has stepped aside while an investigation is underway. But the violence is not stopping. During protests against Ojwang's death, DW cameras caught the shooting of a young vendor in the head on video. 2 police officers were arrested as a result.
The police officer who did that particular shooting was masking his face. That's even illegal. So a lot of illegalities. So as a protester, you have to know that when you go to the streets, you're going to deal with goons, militia, and police officers disguised in goons' clothes or civilian clothes.
The National Police Service denies working with such groups. Rex's case is one of only 2 of the 60 deaths from last year to make it to an official inquest in court. Rex's parents and other families had hoped for police support to commemorate the anniversary of last year's deaths.
We want to plant flowers for our fallen heroes. We want to have prayers for our kids to mark that 1 year down the line. Are we supposed to keep quiet?
Rex's mother says she's not going to keep quiet and has vowed to march for justice for him and the others.
bring in DW's Edith Kimani, who is at this protest in Nairobi for us today. Edith, we heard Rex Masai's mother there vowing to march for justice. How many people are doing just that in Nairobi today?
Well, in the morning when we arrived at the protest area in the central business district, they were in the tens. Then a few hours later, they were in the hundreds. And by the time we were leaving to come just a few kilometers away from the central business district, they were in the thousands. And one of the people who we actually saw was Rex Masai's mother. She was right there at the front line with several activists and Kenya's former Chief Justice. Now, whether or not the police knew she was there, she was still tear gassed with the rest of the protesters. And this is just an indication that, unlike last year, this year, there are people who are pulled from various generations. There was actually a freedom fighter from Kenya's independence times who is wheelchair bound, who showed up and said he was going to stand with young people today because he also wants accountability from Ruto's government.
There have been severe allegations against police cracking down on demonstrators over the past year. How have they been acting today? We hear that tear gas is being used and water cannon. What have you witnessed?
Well, this is really a city of two different kinds of police officers today. Right now, behind me, these are traffic police officers who also have with them anti-riot police officers. You can tell that they're very calm. Their only job right now is to make sure that they're controlling the traffic that's going into the central business district where the protests are happening. However, in the central business district where we were, we saw police officers who saw us and recognized us as members of the press and lobbed tear gas directly at us. We also saw police officers who, after lobbing tear gas, would then scream and shout as though in celebration. So very much an adrenaline-driven group within the central business district. We did, as you mentioned, also saw people who were being carried after being injured. And so it is likely that as the day unfolds, we'll hear more and more cases of run-ins with police officers.
We're actually looking at live pictures there from the protests, and the tear gas in the air is visible just from the sheer quantity. More than 60 deaths allegedly related to police violence from last year are being investigated. Edith, what is taking so long? What's the holdup?
This is the question that every single Kenyan is asking IPOA. That's the Independent Policing and Oversight Authority. In the report that's just aired, you've heard that only 2 cases have made it to court so far. Now, if you ask IPOA, which we did, they'll tell you that the hurdle is actually with the prosecutor. The 36 cases are actually already done with the investigations, and the prosecutor now needs to take them through the court process. But the justice system here in Kenya moves very, very slowly. It is very likely that people who died last year will not be able to get justice, perhaps until even another government has taken over.
These protests are being dubbed the Gen Z protests, but you've talked about how people from all walks of lives and all generations are joining in. Is there a sense that this movement could grow bigger through the sheer solidarity that people have with each other?
Certainly, it feels that way today. Now, because of the localized nature of the protests today, like I mentioned, there are people who are being held back to go into the central business district. A lot of the protests are unraveling or unfolding within localized communities. But we are seeing people turn up. All around me, actually, we call them border operators here. These are motorbike operators who do not have work and do not see a prospect of getting into the central business district. And so they're hanging around here waiting for a chance to go and get their voice heard. Online is where you really get an indication of how big this movement could potentially be, with young people both at home and on the streets rallying behind those who've managed to make it to the streets today.
Edith Kimani in Nairobi, thank you so much and take good care out there.